Hello and welcome to this special episode of Prinsights Global Spotlight, where I am thrilled to welcome Jay Martin here for the first time. He is the president and CEO of Cambridge House International and host of the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, which is happening around the corner. We'll have information for you to follow that along or to potentially attend at the bottom of this interview. Over the past decade, Jay's helped build Cambridge House into one of the leading conference platforms to the entire global resource investment space and community. And as host of VRIC 2026, he is going to convene again investors, mining executives, and macro thinkers to examine where the next phase of the commodity cycle is going and how we can participate in it. Jay, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Nomi. I'm looking forward to this, and I'm stoked you're coming back to Vancouver in January. It's going to be an amazing event, so looking forward to it.
Thank you. I'm excited. I'm working on the speech as we speak in the back of my mind. So I'm very thrilled. Jay, you have been in this space forever, clearly. And right now, between all of the years that you've built Cambridge House to where it is today, hosted and convene VRIC year after year while also talking to macro thinkers, investors, resource execs around the world. For those who don't know you and should, can you just talk a little bit about your personal background related to this space and how that's evolved over time?
Yeah, certainly. So I purchased Cambridge House in 2012 out of sort of relative insolvency. This was at the time a mining conference company that had 8 mining investment conferences scattered around North America. And anybody who was in the industry during that year remembers that that's when the big waterfall of share prices really started to take hold. And the company had seen about 86% of its clientele become bankrupt, defunct, or just unable to afford its services. And so in my youthful naivety, I thought this is something I want to sink my teeth into and fix. I raised a bunch of debt financing and we took it over. And that was on the assumption that that mining bear market might last for 36 months, right? Which ended up being obviously 11, 11 years. But we can talk about that because it's an interesting time to be in the market. And honestly, Nomi, the absolute best time to build this company because during the final years of a frothy bull market or even in the middle of one, if you're newer to the industry, it's remarkably hard to get the access that you really want. Access to people like yourself, access to high quality early investment opportunities. You want to build your network with the top performers. Well, everybody's too busy for you, right? And getting too many inquiries anyways. But during those true gutter years of an industry like we experienced in 2014, 15, and 16, somebody would be able to, and I was able to, build my Rolodex in a way that I never could have otherwise. And now we get to harvest that, right? Now that sentiment has shifted and the industry is in a very different place, we get to harvest all that work, right? And between you and I get a bit of anxiety when I see the gold price begin to run and share prices begin to climb because I know what's coming. And I enjoy a quiet market where you can, move without being detected to a degree, right? And promotion doesn't pick up so fast. And it's actually easier to due diligence as an investor in a bear market because there's just far less frivolous promotional dollars flying around and polluting your newsfeed with companies that aren't worth your time. So good market, like we're heading into a good market. That's great for investors, but there's actually more reasons to be a bit cautious today than there might have been even 5 years ago. So
It's really interesting you say that, Jane. You've had that experience of building your network. And, I take a look at the list of exhibitors that are going to be mining executives that are participating at this year's VRIC, and it is phenomenal. So what you have done to build that network and how you allow the opening of that network to investors, to participants is really remarkable, particularly as we head into a period where there are new investors every day coming into the market and looking for investments. And it is important to know what's good and what isn't. And you have that experience. So as you look towards this year unfolding and into the conference coming up, we'll talk a bit more about that in detail. What feels exciting or sort of different to you with your experience in these different cycles for 2026 versus even 2025.
Yeah, there's one major shift that's occurred, and it's the single most important thing that new mining investors, curious mining investors, and legacy mining investors need to understand. And that is that our industry, mining, has been the most hated industry on the planet for the last 12 years. And it was everybody. Political leaders hated the sector. They knew the easiest way to get elected was to demonize and vilify anything that was counter to what they labeled sustainability and renewability. Media got in line. Media hated us and loved picking on any potential enemies of the carbon narrative or the climate change narrative. And as a consequence, when an industry is in that environment where political sentiments against you, media sentiments against you, not very many investors are going to enter that arena because that's a crazy headwind to fight against, especially when for the last decade you could just clip 10% by jumping into the Mag 7. That was a much easier bet to make. And so most people made that bet. And as a consequence, the sector wasn't just hated, it was starved of capital for the last 10, 12 years. And all of that has very suddenly changed. And again, it started at the top. It started with the President of the United States, who's not just speaking favorably about the mining sector, he's directing the government to actively invest into it. And media has gotten in line right behind him. And by the way, it's not just the US, of course. Prime Ministers of Canada with the Special Projects Office, Prime Minister of Australia, many European prime ministers, President of Mexico now walking back her talk about open pit mining bans. The West is changing their tune on the heels of the shift in American political sentiment. And media's gotten in line. They're no longer vilifying the sector, but they can't outright say that mining is good because for the last 12 years, they've just said mining is bad. And so they changed the language. And now they put out stories that say things like copper is now a matter of national security and silver is now a matter of national security. And we need to care about this. This is important, right? It's like, okay, great. We're on the same page now. And in that environment, investors walk in because they can see the tailwind, and it's great to invest in a tailwind. And that's the big shift. And it is a big shift. It's not, people watch the gold price rise, and many generalist investors make the mistake of thinking that this is just the next asset to run. Maybe they made money in cannabis in 2017 and crypto in 2018 and AI stocks or real estate, whatever. They caught a bull market or a few of them over the past few years. And now they're watching gold run and they think, oh, this is the next asset to run, right? And they're just jumping in and they're calling it the debasement trade and all of this. But gold is structurally different. And most of the time, good news for gold investors is bad news for pretty much everybody else. But more importantly, it's not just the next asset rally. It's a smoke signal of massive change, right? And that's what's behind this. And that's why I say it is a big shift. This isn't a shift in sentiment that I anticipate lasting 18 months. This is a paradigm shift in how governments think about their control of natural resources, how they're going to influence the flow of capital, right? And the exposure that everybody from the retail investors up to central banks are looking for has changed. And so it is tectonic, and it's not the same industry whatsoever that it was 2, 3, 4, 7 years ago at all.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. And tectonic is a fantastic word for it because it isn't really a cyclical thing. It's not even as you said, an 18-month thing. This is a structural sort of realignment in terms of the importance that governments around the world are putting on the entire commodity supply chain and what that requires from the standpoint of both national investment, international alliances, and also therefore where private capital is going and where investors can be a part of that.
100%. And this is a point of contention in our industry, seeing government money finance mining companies, right? Do we want the government in our business? And a lot of people say no. My answer is, doesn't matter what I think. It's happening. This is the future. We're going to see more of this. I don't think that people should follow the government's lead. They're now a 15% shareholder of MP Materials. Maybe that'll work out. That project's also gone bankrupt twice in the past. So I wouldn't say the government's the most sophisticated allocator of capital, but that's not the point. It's emblematic of the shift in sentiment. And there's now a new buyer at the table with incredibly deep pockets, but more importantly, one that has the political will to shorten permitting times, remove bureaucracy and regulation, and actually get these projects moving forward, because that's been the biggest barrier. When we talk about the last 10 years of political sentiment against the industry, that was the result, is that projects would not get permitted. They'd be stuck in regulation for decades at a time, sometimes multiple decades. And that was the reality. And that's what shifted, after the US government wrote that $35 million check into Trilogy Metals, one of about 8 different mining deals they've done in the last 8 months. They bought 10% of the company up in Alaska. But right after they wrote that check, they coordinated the Bureau of Land Management to get the access road to the property built. This is a high quality critical metals project, but the problem was you couldn't get there outside of a boat or a helicopter. And so it wasn't economic. And under the Biden administration, back to permits and regulation, they had banned that road ever being built. And so the project was always a non-starter. What was notable about this is right after the check was written, the policy changed, right? And so it's a new activist investor at the table. And the activist part is the part that mining investors should pay attention to. No, I don't want the government in my business. I'm a small business entrepreneur. I'm a free market guy through and through. But nobody in the political class cares what I think. They're going to do what they're going to do. It's my job to play the game in front of me, not complain about the rules. And so that's what we try to do. And that's what we do at the conference and on the podcast, is understand the game in front of us and then leverage accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense, because at the end of the day, whether the government, does the right allocations, or whether those particular companies, like you mentioned, MP is the one that's going to outperform the rare earth sector, or other ones are, it does sort of lift awareness for the entire sector. And as you mentioned, the speed at which permits are, or the speed that is increasing with respect to permits, and also infrastructure needed to get to the mines and access materials and get it out, is definitely a part of what you want to consider as an investor. So are these some of the topics, you mentioned this is going to be something that's discussed at the conference, but when you see, again, this year's conference from relative to other years, with all of these additional changes and momentum building for the political will, infrastructure, et cetera, what are the key takeaways that you want investors who attend? I'm asking you in advance, but to basically be aware of and potentially come away with going into the rest of the year?
A couple things. Number one, mining investors have always had to think about jurisdictional risk. They think about, if I invest in this country, what's the probability that something bad happens politically or culturally, right? Could the mine get nationalized? Could there be civil unrest that would compromise the operation, something like this? But jurisdiction risk should be defined differently going forward. And the way I think about it is, given everything we've just discussed about political sentiment expediting the projection of these businesses, but only in countries that are friendly with the United States. And so there's like a new alignment of nations that I'm very bullish on. Anybody who, if they can produce copper, if they can produce nickel, lithium, silver, that would benefit the American administration, is going to receive favorable treatment on the global stage if you're aligned in that fashion. And so that's countries like Canada, Mexico, Brazil. These are the countries that investors should look at a little bit differently. It's not to say don't invest in countries that aren't aligned, but it's just important to understand that, right? I mean, when you think about jurisdiction risk, you put a place like the Congo in the no-go zone, but people like Robert Friedland have made billions of dollars there. So you can go if you're aware of the risks, but just be aware that jurisdiction has shifted, jurisdictional risk has shifted. So at the conference, to help people understand that, I mean, this is one of the major conversations we're going to have. So we've actually got the head of mines and energy from Mexico coming up to the conference to talk about shifts south of the border, south of the American border, and what that means for the extraction industries. We have the former Minister of Defense from Canada coming to talk about Arctic wealth and sovereignty, because the North, the Arctic, is a hotbed right now, and it's an area that hasn't really mattered for a long time because it's been frozen and not navigable. But that's changed. It's thawed, and ships are now passing through in greater numbers than they ever had. And almost all of those ships are Russian or Chinese. That coastline is Canadian. Canada has the largest coastline in the world, and it's largely undefended. And there's tens of trillions of dollars worth of resource wealth in that Arctic crust. And so that was really what's behind, I think, a lot of the sentiment about what are we going to do about Canada after Trump got elected, because something's got to happen. But, I think what he wanted to occur from those threats about the 51st state was that the new prime minister would take defense seriously. And he has. He's promised a 5x defense spending over the next decade. And so big conversations in both of America's neighbors. What's happening down there in both of these very resource-rich countries, Canada and Mexico, in relation and in response to American policy. And so I love this stuff. Like I'm so excited, and the panels we have set up are going to be amazing. And to get to jam with you on stage with this subject is just like, it's thrilling to me. So I can't wait. But geopolitics will take a front row at this event in a way that it hasn't in the past, because it hasn't mattered as much as it does today. There's like 3 tiers to all the content that we produce at the conference, Nomi, and I'd like to start at the very top, which is what matters geopolitically, right? Because that often dictates sort of macroeconomic policy. So we start with geopolitics, then we go to macro, and then we go right into the third layer, which is direct capital allocation. Where can we make money in 2026? And we've got about 80 keynote speakers we're flying in for this event. Anybody who takes the podium is somebody who we've vetted their track record over the last few years of allocating capital to the resource business. We like what we see. And now they're just stepping up to the podium to tell investors where they're putting their cash in the year ahead. And so if investors are curious about, they want to hear many perspectives, insights, ideas about where opportunity might be, where risk is they should avoid, this is the show for you for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I cannot be more excited, again, about attending what you have gathered. And you're right, where we are right now in the geopolitical, jurisdictional, capital allocation evolution, tectonic evolution, to use your word, Jay, of the commodity space. This is the beginning of something massive. And to kick it off at the VRIC conference for 2026, I think personally, for the conference, for everything that you're doing, all the participants, me personally, I'm so glad to be attending, I think is the best way to kick off looking at adding investments in this space to anybody's portfolio, whether starting from zero or starting from gold to silver, silver to copper, copper to uranium, or whatever it might be beyond that, and looking at all of these factors. So we're going to put up the information again right below here. Everyone watching, I encourage you to check this out. Check out the links below. Check out the VRC conference to the extent that you can. This is the moment. 2026 is really the beginning, and the VRC conference is setting the stage for a lot of incredible information and upside to come. Jay, any parting words from you before we sign off and see each other in a few weeks?
Yeah, I would just say, the conference is actually, general admission is free to attend. When you walk into this event, there's a marketplace of mining companies that are looking to raise capital. And since they want your investor dollars, it only makes sense to me that they foot the bill for the event. And so somebody can show up and attend all of the talks totally cost-free. Now, for any keeners that want like a behind-the-scenes exclusive access, there are VIP tickets available with guaranteed seating in the speaker hall, which is always at capacity and definitely will be this year. But more importantly, you get to come to the keynote speakers cocktail party. If you want to meet Nomi, meet myself, meet Rick Rule, Robert Kiyosaki, David Rosenberg, any of the speakers, the minister, anybody at the event, I ensure they're there to meet with the super keen investors who want to have a quieter conversation with somebody they're really keen to get to know and hit with a couple questions. And so we provide that experience in addition to all the meals being catered, and we take great care of you. The VIP is almost sold out, so jump on it if you're interested, but there are a few left. Otherwise, general admission is free, and we try our best to democratize this information. We think of the company as an ambassador for the sector, and so the more people we can educate about the importance of understanding hard money, that's what it's all about. So January 25th, 26th, vricmedia.com.
Thank you so much, Jay. Looking so forward to it. Everybody else, again, check it out. I encourage you to do that right now. Jay, thank you again. Everyone watching here today on Prinsights Global, thank you so much. See you soon.